Hi guys. So by trade I'm a school teacher, but I did sign up and get onto a midwifery programme at KCL, but I couldn't get adequate childcare, unfortunately. Okay, so I want to talk about what happens after us queers have had our babies. One of my kids, my oldest kid, came back from a collage Children of Lesbians and Gays Everywhere event wearing a brilliant t-shirt. It was black and it said queer spawn in dripping red writing. So this is about our queer spawn. Let's reclaim it. Okay. So this is based on a book that I wrote with Carrie Paechter about LGBTQI, parenting, families and schools, and we tried to be really inclusive with the L, the G, the B, the T, the Q and the I. We looked at 5 linked studies, so we interviewed parents, children, we looked at school websites for inclusive policy, we looked at newspaper articles about LGBTQI parenting families, and we evaluated a programme called Educate and Celebrate that seeks to usualise LGBTQI people across the curriculum. So these were the people that we talked to. 23 parent interviews, 19 children, and we tried to be inclusive of people living in cities and the countryside. Most were cisgender, but we had 2 trans men, 4 women who identified as women of trans history, 1 who was genderqueer, 1 as non-binary, 1 as intersex, and with lots of different kinds of sexual orientations. Most of the research on this stuff is very white, very middle class, and very urban, so we tried to be as diverse as possible. We put out our calls, and we ended up with 1 black woman interviewed as part of the cohort. That's not enough, and I want to do better with my next project. A real variety of families. So some were single parents, some were co-parenting. The children were aged 2 to adults. Some were adopted, some fostered, some born into heterosexual families where people then came out later. One family had a child born to a trans man, and the rest were kind of born to lesbian couples or single parents by donor insemination. So a major theme in our data was that people had different strategies of trying to be visible or invisible as parents, and so did their children. So I'm going to talk briefly about the parents first, and then I'll talk about what the children said. So bear in mind, this is about families interacting with public institutions, schools. Schools are a good example of where the individual has to interact with authority. So, as is a healthcare setting. So it's a good place to look at how people are described and how people are talked about and reacted to. So some parents had a very active approach to being visible. One said, I joined the PTA. This was a really, really butch lesbian, she said, as she described herself. I joined the PTA, which is really funny. I never thought I'd join the PTA. I was very conscious about it. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be a different representative of what a parent or carer looks like. I don't have standard long hair. I don't wear the usual clothing. I'm fairly masculine in appearance and I've got short hair. I have tattoos. Lots of the women at school have tattoos, but they're different than mine. I wanted to be as out as possible and have a name. So she's a long-term foster carer. For people who were actively visible, it was really, really important. It wasn't always just about sexual orientation, it was also about gender identity, and it was all about being visibly out and proud and not wanting to put it on the kids to have to explain everything. Our intersex respondent felt that educating other parents about intersex was important, and in fact a lot of these active visible parents did a lot of kind of informal educating as they went along. A lot of this was part of not having secrets, especially if the children had kind of a problematic history. So where there was a foster child with a background that lots of people in that school knew about, this parent just didn't want this to be another big secret or another weird thing. So there was another group of parents who did not want to be visible, but were. And one said, one of the things I felt strange about was sitting in the assembly, putting my hand up to ask something about language teaching. Sir, what's your question? Then feeling like I'm always seen as this heterosexual couple, me and my ex, because they'd read me as a man, and feeling like I'd like to be a bit more visibly queer in that situation, because I suppose I like being queer, that's part of my identity, that I like being queer, although I like being read as male as well. And that was Sylvie, who's non-binary and has a cis female partner. Being unwantedly visible, or invisible but wanting to be visible, was a real problem for people who are often perceived as being part of a heterosexual couple, like a trans man with a female partner. And it was especially problematic for single parents, who are often assumed just to be heterosexual if they're on their own. So there was another group of parents who just wanted to be a family like any other. So they would be out to the school, but they wouldn't want anything special to be said about it. And Rachel said, I mean, naturally just kind of mentioning my partner in a not, I mean, I don't go around saying, hello, I'm a lesbian. I go around saying, oh, you know, my partner, she does this. And I do it as soon as I can, because I actually think, well, if people are homophobic, they can just decide to diss me now. I don't want to get to know people and then find they have dodgy views and all that stuff. I had a friend who was in the playground, a lesbian mother, and her kid ran up to her and went, oh, hi, Mummy Sarah, can I go and play with my friend? And the woman next to her turned around and said, don't you hate it when they call us that? It makes us sound like a lesbian mum. I know. I'm just going to skip past this because I want to move on to what the kids are saying. The people who were particularly precarious in their invisibility were women of trans history. And some of them were really, really careful to not be out. So Adele said, I never go near the school without making my hair right, never in slobbing androgynous clothing. I'm always on edge and it's exhausting. I feel like I'm walking a tightrope with a big drop. And some just didn't even go to the school. Some trans women mothers or parents just didn't go to the school at all. I'm going to move on quickly. So I want to talk about the kids now. A lot of the children that we talk to, now remember that our queer spawn have to decide whether to come out or not as the children of queer families. Isla said, I wanted to go to Pride in support of my mum because I wanted to show people that I'm not ashamed of her. And actually, the atmosphere there was amazing. I can't wait to do it again next year. She met her boyfriend at Pride. It was another lesbian mum's kid. And another issue was that actually children don't want to be completely individual as queer spawn. So Ada said, I think that one of the benefits of both my mums coming to Parents' Evening is that you find you're not just in a big group, in an enormous group of people. I mean, I'm different in a little way because I'm just not identical to everyone else. I don't really enjoy being like everyone else. And what some of them found was that if the school was too good at usualising LGBT people, they didn't feel special anymore. And it feels like a loss. I'm not sure what to do with that. Some of our kids find themselves having to justify their existence from a very early age. So John said, well, basically, like in the early years, people sort of ask, how are you alive if you only have two mums? And like you have to answer them. It takes quite a long time to get through that. Like still, year 5 and 6 people come up to you who you don't really know and say, wait, so how are you alive if you have two mums? And have to explain it to them. And Nick said, once or twice I've been asked crazy things like, were you born like half and half? Half in one mum and half in the other? And what I really find annoying is that sometimes they'll say, which one is actually your mum? And I'm like, they're both. Both? No, one's a childminder. Okay. So, to conclude, most parents are out to school to some extent, but it's by no means safe for everybody, particularly women with a trans history. Children really need to be able to choose whether or not they come out or not. LGBT parents, LGBTQI parents and their children don't always have a lot of control about whether they come out. Being open at school is usually pretty unproblematic, and schools are quite good at dealing with things like bullying and things, but what they're not as good at is being representative in their curriculum. So it's not just about having the gay lesson. It's about weaving everybody through the curriculum so that the curriculum represents everybody in the school. So you just happen to say, look, we're talking about this artist today, she happens to be Mexican, we're talking about this scientist today, he happens to be gay, and just weaving it through like it's no big deal. And we're talking about all of the protected characteristics in the Equality Act here, so ethnicity and faith and disability, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. I often get asked, but if children say that's really gay in the playground, they don't really mean it, do they? I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Actually, our children do mind. They do. They hear that and they feel unsafe. So there is a need for all schools to be LGBTQI+ inclusive, including Parkfield in Birmingham, where there's currently huge protests about the inclusion of LGBTQI people in the curriculum. Not all LGBTQI parented families are obvious and visible to schools. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to finish with, and thank you for having me today.